So sometimes we might want to incorporate text from other languages into our primarily English language piece. So there's a few ways you can do this. In Weaving a Malawi Sunrise, most of the times I will either explain what a term means. I might also just use it in context with the expectation that the reader will be able to figure out what I'm talking about. So for example, Memory called out, "Odie, Odie," and I don't offer an explanation in this case or a translation because there's the context of what's happening. She's calling out for someone that she doesn't know very well when she enters her yard. And so you can sort of figure out that it's some sort of a call like, "Hey, are you home?" kind of a thing. And it just doesn't require an explanation. In Malawi, it's said, "A woman cannot make good nsima. Who cannot make good nsima will not be able to keep her husband happy." Okay, so nsima has already been defined at this point, so I don't define it every time I use it. Nsima is a kind of a patty made out of maize or corn flour. The girls laid out their chitangis on the hard cement floor of the science room. When I introduce chitangis for the first time, I talk about them. I talk about the kind of cloth that they're made out of, and I talk about how much they cost and all those kinds of things. So by the time we get to this scene on page 204, you know what chitangis are. I'm not going to belabor it. In Of This Earth, Rudy Wiebe uses a lot of both high and low German. And sometimes he offers a translation and sometimes he doesn't. So sometimes he'll either just let the language wash over you and just let it be there, or if he thinks that the specific words are important enough, he will offer a translation. And it seems to work. I would say that by the end of the book, you just get used to that. And, if there's something specific you don't know, you would make the effort to look it up online if you wanted to. Otherwise, you just go with it. And then he also does offer translations, like I said, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. I like how he does it in this excerpt here. "I know the wagon track that begins there on his yard will end half a mile farther west, deeper in the darkening forest, but the sky will still be aflame with light. Tous, home." So without saying, "This word means home," just offering the translation right there. So this is from Rosina the Midwife. There's a fair amount of Italian woven into the text. And so nothing really complicated. So most of the time you have a sense of what it might mean, or sometimes there's a translation. I imagine that still that still woman with the smooth face and small dark eyes bunch her skirt up to her knees and run toward her son. "Dio mio, Francesco." And then in this one, an email that says, Grazie. And then the last one, which I'm not going to try to say out loud, but she's offering a translation right afterwards. There's been a lot of talk more recently about writers feeling as though they shouldn't have to offer a translation. I understand where this sentiment comes from, and I would honor that. If that's the way the writer feels, that's certainly their right to feel that way. I think from a practical perspective, I have to think of the reader. And so I try to strike that balance. I don't want to interrupt the text too much because then you take away from what you're trying to write and what you're trying to accomplish. At the same time, a reader doesn't want to be left behind too much. It's your judgment call as the writer. Personally, I think you should try to offer a translation most of the time, or something that suggests what the translation is. There's a fair amount of Inuit in Tanya Tagak's Split Tooth, and sometimes she doesn't offer a translation, and you know what? I think that's okay. Like the spots I'm looking at, it's, to me, I have no idea what she's saying in some of the spots, but it's a language that's just beautiful for me because I don't know the alphabet. So it looks pretty to me. So there's an aesthetic appeal, I suppose you could say. And so I don't need to know what she says. And if I really wanted to, I probably could find out, but I'm okay with just looking at it and appreciating it for what it is. And I suspect that's probably what she had in mind. It's like anything else. Anything that we read will be influenced by our experiences, and sometimes we will get a lot of underlying nuance that another reader might not get, and sometimes we won't get as much underlying nuance that another reader might get. So it's a bit of a trade-off. But be thinking about that. And if you want help in a specific spot, ask me and we can talk it out. The other thing that you might consider is using a bit of vernacular, particularly in dialogue. So I've added in some vernacular here. Wigging out means going crazy. Birth control seats, bucket seats, the heat, police. Most modern readers wouldn't know what these mean. These are from like 50s, 60s vernacular. You will rue this day. This is from a piece I wrote. This is a piece of dialogue from my grandfather. It was from an old book that he took this expression, and it was something that he said to his grade 1 teacher after she'd given him the strap. So he got another strap a second time. Obviously, this isn't something we'd say today, but it was something as a kid that he'd read, and I guess he thought it was really dramatic. And so it's kind of an interesting piece of dialogue. That hard-skulled ignoramus McGibbon, that's actually a quote from my father's letters. It's just one that I pulled. There's a lot of vernacular in his letters, and I like the idea of including that because I think that shows the time. And because I'm incorporating his letters into my memoir, it's kind of neat because it helps the reader as well as me, the writer, to show that, to either sense as the reader or to give that sense of a time shift. So his writing is very much in the vernacular of the time. I mean, I don't think many people would call someone a hard-skulled ignoramus today. You'd call them something else maybe. Let's blow this joint. That's from Soft in the Middle. So yeah, that takes you back a little while for sure. Now, if you're writing about something that happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago or yesterday, then you're going to have a different kind of vernacular. Now, like any kind of slang or accent or kind of quirk, you might not want to overwhelm the reader with it. You might want to judiciously add in a little phrase of maybe Gen Z slang, but you wouldn't want to overwhelm the reader because then they wouldn't get what you're trying to communicate as well as if you just throw a little bit in here and there, and it can be kind of fun.